You got to be willing to offend some people, hurt some feelings, you know, if you're going to make real art that affects things, that affects change. And we haven't been doing that. People have been making propaganda that makes themselves feel good about themselves. Like, oh, I'm such a good person because I watched Netflix and they massaged me with my ego. Like, no, that's not art. So art challenges people, it challenges your thinking, it makes you think in more nuanced ways. It makes you look at the world differently. It gives you empathy for your fellow man, right? And, you know, like the story of Jonah, right? Like I was saying about Jonah before. It's a nuanced story because it's also about how Jonah wasn't a perfect person. He actually didn't like these Ninevites. He wanted them to be destroyed by God. But because Jonah knew that God was a merciful God and he would forgive them if they repented, he didn't want to give them that message. So this is a very nuanced story, right? This is a guy who is a man of God, but he kind of has a little hatred in his heart, right? So is that possible? Yeah, guess what? It's possible. I've met lots of Christians who had some issues in their own life, and they weren't perfect people, but God was also using them for good. And he can do the same thing for all of us. Like, we don't have to have all of our doctrine in a row. Like, we don't have to have all of our perfect doctrine. But what we have to be willing to do is listen. We have to be willing to do some hard work of studying, whether it's the Bible or what other stories we have to study to get our art right. And you got to be able to make the hard choices to get some of this art made, friends. Like, you got to be able to do that. So feature films are expensive, but make a short film or something, which is the same kind of thing you want to make in your feature. Use that short to do a crowdfund, raise money to make your feature. People have made features for $10,000, okay? You got to be willing to do what it takes to do something like that. You know, I mean, the first feature I wrote was called Blood Covenant, and I wrote it because I liked writing it. It was a kind of story I liked writing, and if I didn't enjoy myself writing it, I probably wouldn't have written it. So that was my criteria for writing it. I wrote it, and I finished writing it, and guess what? I couldn't shoot it because I didn't write it to be producible. I wrote it with a bunch of action sequences and a bunch of effects and locations that I could not possibly have in my film. And I don't care if I had rewritten it 100 times, I still could not have produced it because I didn't have the skill to produce this kind of story. So was that a failure on my part? Absolutely not. That was the point of writing that script, is to write a script, to write something that I thought was good. And guess what? Then I wrote another script. And that script was more producible, but still not quite up to my level. I wrote it to be more producible, but it still wasn't because I had too many actors that were difficult to find. I looked for these actors, I couldn't find them because it was certain kinds of actors. So that was another mistake I made, but that's okay. It's not a big deal. So I'm working on another script. And this script is meant to be far more producible. So that's just a small example of what you might have to go through, right, to learn how to make good films. You might be on your third film and it's the good one, right? Or you might do this numerous times, or you might start out in film working for someone else, like I did. So, you know, these are all important steps quite often to making your own art better and making it so you can make it the way you want to make it and the way you need to make it. So, you know, this is more like from an artistic perspective, from an artist's perspective, from a Christian artist's perspective, but I'm telling you, you got to make something that offends these people, right? And so, like, don't go home thinking, oh, I did a good job if you just made the same kind of art everybody else made. Like, please try to do better than that. We need to do better than that. So, I'm not saying it has to be the most brilliant thing ever, right? It just has to be counterculture.